what we're going to be working on for your next project is the beginnings of being able to lay out pages with words and images. And it's not that I expect you all to become graphic designers. It's that I expect you to understand what a graphic designer's limitations and what they work with and how they lay out a page, so that you understand the relationship between photography and a page layout. And the photo stories that we shoot for print media is going to be different than the photo stories that we shoot for multimedia and web-based media. Okay, so I'm going to put a demo together based upon a story that I've written. And the assignment asks you to develop a 1,000-word script, or a 1,000-word written story. About 500 words will fit on a typical 8.5 by 11 page with images. So we want a 2-page magazine spread. We need about 1,000 words to accomplish that. And you'll notice that in magazine publications, if you look at a writer's market, you will see that they have an average word count for the article, and what they pay is based upon number of words, and they expect a certain number of words. But you'll notice, here's my story, and I have 1,100 words, give or take. So just over 1,000 words, close enough for our purposes, right? So the first thing is to write the story. The second thing is to find the graphics that are going to go with this. In this case, what are the photos that are going to go with it? We're going to be working with a page layout program called InDesign that allows us to put words and images together in any way we want. We have total control over it, as opposed to PowerPoint, which feels like you've got some control, but it doesn't have the quality that we would expect in a fine design. InDesign is different than a word processor. It does not store the contents of your images and words in the InDesign document. It only stores a link to those documents. Okay? So when I upload to a blog and I upload images to my blog and I type in text, all that stuff's stored up on the blog. It's in there. With InDesign, if I place an image in InDesign and it's not, and I move it after the fact or rename it, it'll break the link. So it's very important that we have good organization. Here with this story I've put together, I've got the Word document here, I've got the graphics in here, and that'll make sense as we go along. Here's another story we'll take a look at that's already complete. I've got my InDesign document, I've got my Word document, and then I have my linked images as well. So I want to select my images and write my story. So I'm going to launch InDesign by going into my applications, which I'll just jump in here, applications, and open up the application. Unfortunately for you, if you're working in one of our labs, every time you open up this program, there's going to be a set of preferences that you're going to want to change, because we are not designers, we don't work in print shops, we don't work in the same ruler measurements that graphic designers typically use, and I would guess that most graphic designers today don't also work in picas either. And so when I go into and I say I need a new print document, I'm going to have you set up for a 4-page document with facing pages. And what we're going to do is create a mini magazine, so to speak, with a cover, 2-page spread with an article, and then a back cover. Okay, so we're going to have 2 full bleed images, and then we're going to have a 2-page spread with images in it. You'll notice, with words and images in it, yes. I'm going to go with letter size, but you notice the width here is in picas, right? Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone for right now. Just say OK. And immediately I'm going to go into Preferences and go to Units and Increments. And I'm going to change it from picas to inches. Okay. The terminology for picas and points is all based upon the old days of leaded type, that they would have so many 72 points equaled 1 inch, and so many picas would equal an inch, etc. And you and I aren't going to work with that, and I don't pretend to be a designer per se. but I do understand some aspects of it. The next thing we're going to do is we don't want this to look like a word processor document, do we? We want this to feel a little bit more like a magazine. So I'm going to, I've got my pages over here. Here's my cover page. I'm going to go to my second and third page, and let me just kind of zoom out so we can see it all. And I'm going to select Layout, Margins and Columns, and I'm going to change the number of columns to 2, and then I'm going to change the gutter between the columns to 1/4 inch, just to give a little space for my 2 columns. I'm going to go and do that to the same on the other pages. In fact, I should have done it. I should have shift clicked it, and I could have had them both set up at the same time. So I'll just go into Margins and Columns, change this to 2, and a gutter of 1/4 inch. Okay? Now, we've got our Word document here, and the nice thing about it is I can go through and do some spell checking, go, oh, I have a double and in there, and I'll just go through and look. Here's I can decide whether or not I want to keep the grammar as is. In that case, I'm going to leave it the way I think it's right anyway. Don't always agree with the green lines. I've got everything there. I'll save it. Now, before I bring in the words, I actually recommend that we lay out our page with image boxes. So in InDesign, we have what's called the rectangle frame tool, which is simply a placeholder for images that I can bring across. And I'm going to lay out with one dominant image, and then I'm going to lay out a couple of in-column images. And in fact, I'll go ahead and just do those 2 to begin with, and I'll go ahead and place my image, my first image. So to place an image, I go to File and Place. Notice the terminology, place image. File and Place. Before I do that, I need to make sure I caution you, word of caution, save your document before you place anything in it, because otherwise the relative links might get fouled up. So I'm going to go Save As. I'm going to go to my Documents folder, and my page layout. There's my folder with all my resources. And I'm calling this story Thank You Bill. So that's what I'm going to call my document. Okay, I've got that saved in there. Now I'm going to go to File and Place, go into my graphics, and I'm going to find an appropriate image. And like I talked about on the blog, sometimes the detail shot is the most powerful image. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and place this image. Okay, and then I want to see something. You'll notice that the image doesn't, there's more to the image than what the frame allowed. I've got a couple of options when I'm working with photos inside of a rectangle frame. I can go to Object and Fitting, and I can say Fill Frame Proportionally, and that will fill the frame as close as it can to the full proportion. I still don't see everything in there. I can also go to Fitting and Fit Content Proportionally, and you'll notice that there's the whole image, and it's fitting based upon the shortest dimension here. Well, I'm not real crazy about that, so what I'm going to recommend is I'm going to go ahead and extend this out a little bit. And oh, by the way, if I double click on the image, I can recompose it within that frame manually. And if I make it larger, I now have room to adjust that image down. So this is where a designer is always probably going to tweak your composition just a little bit to fit their page layout a little better. Okay? And I wanted to see, is there anything more to that hand? There really isn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and just pull this up here. So you'll notice you have to be aware of this. The default here is the yellow frame is the image. The blue frame is the actual layout box for the image, right? So I've got that set in there. I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Place, and you'll notice the keystroke commands, you'll start to learn them intuitively just by doing it over and over. That's a Command D, so I can hit Command D, and I'll come in here and take a look. And I'll put that image in. And again, you notice I created a vertical image, and I can recompose. That's a horizontal shot that I'm going to recompose to fit my frame. Now I will tell you that I probably want to bring this down and probably have it, you'll notice as I bring it down, InDesign will tell me when things are relative to the size of other elements on the page. So right now it's telling me, hey, that box is the same height as the rectangle frame on the next page. That's probably a good thing, right? Because now I'm going to have some uniformity to my design, so I can go ahead and recompose in that frame, and that actually will work just fine for that frame. So now I'm looking at where do I want this image to be. Do I want to put it down here? Where is it in relation to the other images? And I'm going to copy that frame. I'm just going to go to Edit and Copy. I'm going to paste it. Because now I want my images to be uniform. I don't want different proportion images on the page. I can have different content within the frame, but the proportion of the frame should be identical. So now I'll just come in here and I'll replace that image with a different image. And I'll go, oh, okay, there's that one, right? Yeah. I'll double click on it and I'll move this over because I don't need that much of the hand. It's another detail shot. Okay. So this is a story about a veteran who happens to keep his Vietnam era basic training before he went to Vietnam, his Marine basic training photo inside the bill of his hat. So here he is here, right? Yes. And his name is Bill. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I can say, oh, the relationship here, I may want to break this up a little bit. I may want to move this over here and move this one over here. I've got kind of this asymmetrical composition going on before I've ever laid out any text. Okay. I'll go to the front cover, and I'm going to go ahead and use my rectangle frame. And I'm not worried about print specifications. If I were doing full bleed print, we would actually change this layout just a little bit. I'll show you that in just a moment, but for now, we're doing this for just an exercise. I've laid out my frame. I'm going to go to Command D, Place, and I'm going to put this image in. I'm going to zoom out so I can see that's a pretty big file. Okay. Now I have room up in this blank sky that I can put a title to this, and I will actually. I'm going to grab a text tool and I'm going to go ahead and give this article a title. Can't see anything at that size. I'll zoom in. Command plus and Command minus are the standard keystroke commands for zooming in and out. So I'm going to select an appropriate typeface here. For readability's sake, we typically, for commercial advertising and our logo, I might use a sans serif font. For readability and for a little bit of a nostalgia, I'll probably go ahead and use a typeface that's more legible for, I'm going to use a serif typeface for readability. So I'll probably just, for the heck of it, just go ahead and use Times New Roman for our basic here. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the type size. Okay. And then I'll just put in small type Photos and Story by Ira Gardner. And now I've got this thing here where that large font looks squished up with the line underneath it. So I'm going to actually go ahead and extend this out. This is the leading, is the space between lines. There's two terms that we're going to be dealing with. We're going to deal with leading and we're going to deal with tracking. So I'm going to just make that look about right. I can also add a special effect of a drop shadow if I want. And I like to bring the distance pretty close to it. And now I may want to think about, maybe I want this to be white with black outline. And then maybe I should make that a separate type box without a drop shadow. So I'll just cut that out actually as I think about this. And I'll zoom in. There we go. So now we've got that in there. And now that it's on its own separate type box, I can just put that spacing, whatever I think looks appropriate. Okay. Like I said, I don't plan to make a career as a designer, right? Now I can put these text boxes, I can bring them a little closer together, and I can select both of them, and I can go to Object and Group those elements together, so now they will be locked together. Okay, and I can just kind of adjust that space of where they fit within that sky. Okay, so now I'll bring in my story. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Place, my Word document. Going to bring it in and click and drag to fill up that column. Now I see there's a red plus sign that says there's more text, and I'll go ahead and bring that over, and I'll keep bringing that over. Okay, and now you notice the words went over the image. I'm going to do something about that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and click on the photo frame, and up in here is the text wrap option. Right now it's set to just no text wrap. Here I'll have it wrap around the image so that even if I bring this column of text down, the text won't go over the top. I'm going to go ahead and set that for here, and go ahead and bring the last column over. Okay. Now I've got still some overset text, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of the extra spacing in here. Okay. And also I'm going to go ahead and bring these columns down a little bit, and you notice they're staying pretty balanced together. So I have room for captions. So I'll bring this down. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up and see how much more I need to try to fit in. Quite a bit, actually. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I think I don't have any more words, but I had a lot of spaces. So I can deal with that by going to Edit and Edit in Story Editor, and the Story Editor will show me now. I still have a lot of spaces in there. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and go back and I'll just throw this on the back page here a little bit. And I'm going to select all, and part of the problem is my typeface is defaulting to an odd size. Most type for a magazine is going to be in the 12-point range. Okay. And then I've got a lot of extra paragraph returns in there, and I also have some leading that I can play with to bring some of that in. So you can see some of the challenge that I have is I may have to shrink up this image. I might just go ahead and bring it over, make it a single column image. Oops. Oh. Need to bring the column of the. There we go. So I'll just have to relay this out a little bit, real quick. Maybe I make this a little bit more, just enough to see the hand, right? And then maybe I'm going to move that over here so that we can then just go ahead and raise this up. And then I'm just going to have to deal with all these extra paragraph returns. Okay, and then now I've got plenty of room. I'll have to increase the leading just a little bit. And I've got one widow here. By the way, we call these widows and orphans when I have just one or two words at the bottom here. We generally want to try to fit that together. So I'm going to pull that up. Just get rid of some of those carriage returns in here. Now I've got everything down there. But I'm still going to have some issues because I need to go ahead and inside here just put sort of a headline here. Crank that up a little bit. I tend to center the headlines a little bit, so just like a word processor. And need to make sure we have consistency with our typeface. And make sure we're consistent with our typeface on this as well. Okay. Okay, so now I've got to go in and start tweaking this out just a little bit. So instead of bringing that down, I'm just going to manually bring that down a little bit. And I'm going to look at the size here. This is right now the size is 3.625 by 4.875. And I want to make sure 3 points. Yeah, so they're all the same size. That's good. I've got that down just a little bit. So now I just got to figure out how to get just a little more space to even that out just a little bit. So one of the ways I can do that is I can take an area of type, and one thing I could do is just take this one column and I could increase the leading just slightly, and I could even increase the tracking just a little bit. That's still not, there we go. 9% wider tracking. Nobody that's not a designer would even notice that. Okay. So now I've got my layout there, and then I'll just put my last image in. Get rid of that. Layout is like a puzzle. Just getting the pieces to fit together, and you always have to make compromises. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so we can see this. And I've got an image in here that I'll just go ahead, I need to get the original image on this. And I'll just recompose this a little bit for the layout. So this was an image I made a couple of Christmases ago at the Veterans Cemetery. Okay. So what I just did was in View, I can actually go to Screen Mode, and I can go to Presentation Mode, which is Shift W. So when I don't have anything selected, I can Shift W, and what you'll notice is quite often the image looks pixelated when I'm working on it in general layout terms, when I'm just designing. But if I go into preview mode, if I have enough resolution, the image will show in high quality. And then I can page through it and I can see my page layout. Okay? And these are high enough resolution images. So that's your basic page layout. And I decided to forego the captions on this because the story explains everything pretty readily on that one. I'm going to go ahead and show you another story that I've done, and it actually only has 500 words in it, and it's a profile piece, and I want to show you the writing, kind of the step-by-step writing exercise that I went through for this. And that was simply to go through the who, what, where, when, why, and how before I started writing. And if you pay attention to the video tutorials that Ira Glass puts out, storytelling isn't that difficult if you just describe what it is that's taking place. And so I just kind of went through, put this together, and I actually start with the truth, which is what drew my attention. I saw the word cafe on the side of a parked motorcycle with dropped handlebars and wondered what it meant. Looking at the bike reminded me of the classic Marlon Brando image from the movie The Wild One. Okay? So if I can show you that actually. So I saw this image. I saw this bike, and that's what came to mind. And that's how we work as photographers. We see something, make an association, and decide to do something about it. In this case, I met Chris Carroll and did a photo shoot with him, and then did a layout. Now, this is an interesting layout in that I don't have a lot of images. And what was interesting, though, was finding out that cafe racers have their, the term is a term from England. It was a British term where they would race these bikes that are stripped down of every extra part, and they'd race them from truck stop to truck stop because they had cafes at the truck stop. So that's why they called them cafe racers. You'd meet up at a cafe, and you'd challenge somebody to a race, and you'd race to the next cafe. Okay? So I've laid out my images, I've laid out the photos. you'll notice I've got action shots with panning, I've got portraits, I've got details. I also want to notice a couple things about this layout is that I do have some captions, and I have some information here that says what is the cafe racer. And the reason I have it designed like this, if I were doing kind of this non-fiction magazine layout, I have to allow the viewer to drill down to the information. The days of somebody patiently reading through the whole article and then deciding if they like it or not are over. So what's going on is, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do something real quick. I'm going to go to File, Export, and we're going to make this look like a ebook sort of thing. We're going to go ahead and select a flash player and save it in this folder, and I'll actually create a new folder for output because we can output things a lot of different ways. I'm going to fit it to a certain proportion, and I'm going to tell it to include interactive page curl. This is what I did for that presentation I gave on Friday, as a matter of fact. So I'll zoom out here. This now pretends like it's a magazine that I'm flipping through. And what do we look at? Well, we look at the image, we look at the headline. We look at the images, we look at the headline, we look at the detail, and we decide whether or not we read the story or not. So these kind of pull out graphics, or pull out little blocks of text, can help the viewer digest. We call it data chunking. We want a lot of white space, and we want to be able to pick out little pieces of information very, very quickly and then decide to invest more time to read the story. So that's another strategy for you as well. Okay. Go back to InDesign, and I'll go back to the first story. Actually, I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to show you one other thing before we go. And that is, I'm going to set up a page, and I'll go ahead and just set up a single page letter. And I'm going to put a couple of images on here. I'll undo that, and it just go ahead and brings that, and I'll just go ahead and okay. Now, I want to pretend this is a portfolio page layout. Go ahead and put this in here. Okay. I can now export this as a I can now export this as a JPEG file. And I can set the resolution. If I need to make it print quality, I can set the resolution to 300 pixels. I can embed an sRGB. For some of you that are looking to post to your blog and have multiple images together, you don't have very much control over an inline graphic, right? And so what I recommend is lay out your images in a grid if you want a grid presentation. And now, if I go to the output, I now have this JPEG file. Right? So some of you, if your stories look good set up in two images, and if I want to, I could just crop that and make it a small image. But we're going to be working with this in page layout for your portfolios next quarter. You're going to lay out your portfolio in InDesign and then export JPEGs. And now I could save that graphic. I could post that to my blog and have two images guaranteed to stay side by side, as opposed to being treated like an inline graphic where, depending on how the page width is, it moves things around on me. So I can control the look and feel. So I really want to point out how important it is that you get comfortable with this, right? And later on, we'll talk about doing master pages. Master pages allow me, if I were to have a large document, I'll close this out. Okay. Actually, I'll do it right here. I'll do a master page right here. If I go to pages, I have a master, and I could put anything I want to appear on every page. Let's put photography by Ira Gardner. I'll make it right align. I'm going to actually change the I'll go ahead and make it black, but I'll make the tint like 50%. Okay. Bring it down here. Okay. Now, if I add more pages, and I'll go ahead and add those other images in here. By the way, once I have it in here, it's very easy to grab that whole frame, and you'll notice we'll get these magenta bars that tell me when I'm lined up center on the page. So now I'll go to my next page. And I'll do the last of this demo here. Boom. Okay. Now, when I do a preview, everything's in the same. I could use this to export standardized formatting, right? I could also use master pages. I can insert. I'm going to just put that in there real quick. Insert special character, markers, current page number. Okay. Now I can set that to whatever typeface I want. Maybe I go modern number 20. I don't know. That doesn't look right. Go to my old standard there. And I can put that right aligned if I was wanting it there. And now I can drag that down.
So whatever you do on the master one, it'll do it to all of them?
It'll do it to all pages that have a master assigned to it, right? So look, now I've got page number 1. And it's got page number 2, etc. Now let's say I didn't want a page number on a particular page. I would actually go to this page and go to Assign Master Pages. Okay, apply master to pages right here, and I'd say none, and that would not show up. Okay, so I use master pages to save time on basic layouts and to do page numbering. Okay, any questions about that? All right, well, hopefully that gets you started in the right direction.